Yeah, yeah.
And we're live.
Yeah, anyway, okay, so howdy hi everyone. If you've watched a show about the news, you might be surprised to watch this show, as we are not the news. We're just four people with opinions of the internet, like Facebook, except we're going to try to not call everyone a racist or a Democrat, because those are hateful words. With me tonight are Nathan Wilson, Libertarian Party Executive Director in Georgia, am I right?
Yes.
And an all-around pretty cool dude. MIA is Sarah Highlander. She's a GIS specialist, which is not a misspelling of his. She actually knows things. And Staton Johnson, coffee barista and journalist major and English major and something other major, but not in the military, maybe in the Navy. And Thomas, me, the moderator of this debacle. The format is simple. I will present four previously agreed upon news articles, and the group will present their opinions, followed by a brief discussion of our points. And then we'll move on to the next topic. There will be some judicious editing, and all panelists have been asked not to use naughty language for sake of the children. Seriously, it's really not easy to edit that out. Our first story is a concealed firearm stops mass shooting in its tracks. In Spartanburg, I love that, County of South Carolina, a man stopped another nightclub mass shooting dead in its tracks. How'd he do it? He shot the guy with his concealed handgun. Nathan, is this super aux for the guys sitting on the floor of Congress demanding more gun laws?
Yeah, it is. It goes back to the discussion is like, well, what stops a bad guy with guns? It's a good guy with guns. And there is a concern. This man clearly was trained with it, went through the proper process in order to get a firearm, and was actually aware of the settings around it, which is very, very important. And is actually scary on my part, and I'm sorry for not kind of dumping this on you. We recently had an incident that was posted today of a guy who was who found with a gun and was beaten by cops and shot by cops. He had a legal concealed carry and was essentially murdered by cops by illegally carrying it. So it's kind of terrifying on that end of the overreaction because of the mass shootings that we've had. And so I do caution people who do have them to be very wary of, like flashing them around. But clearly, this man was following the law, being responsible with it, and then using it to actually stop what could potentially be a very deadly situation.
Okay. Staten, do you have any questions, or what do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't have a lot of time to look at this one, but yeah, I pretty much agree with Nathan. Because what we see here is just an instance in real life of what people have always said about legally having guns and being responsible with guns, that they're tools for protection when used properly. So, yeah.
Okay. So now, I think that combined with the LGBTQ, did you all have a chance to read that article?
Yeah, the 4 training operations in Florida with 300 plus people being trained with concealed carry offered to the LGBT community. And these classes, people sign up for stuff all the time. And I've run events, 100 people sign up, but only 20 people show up. Almost 300 people showed up to these training events. So it is something that is very, very serious and people looking at. And so obviously people are re-looking at this on a personal level and going, hey, this is actually important to defend ourselves, because clearly the response time for the police was not sufficient enough. There was not sufficient enough security at these joints. And it's actually found that there was actually friendly fire by the police. So you can't even trust the police to have accurate enough aim in order to protect you. And so having say that person who stopped that shooter at that nightclub in South Carolina was at the, not implying that he's gay or anything, but if he was at the Pulse nightclub, could he have stopped that shooter? How many less victims would we have had? And then how would the response time of the cops been affected?
Well, that actually is a point from the shooting. The gentleman who shot him was actually outside of the club, so he actually would not have had an opportunity to do that legally. But personally, I think that this is a powerful opportunity to build up bridges. What with all the LGBT groups joining in and taking an interest in their Second Amendment rights, Just in Houston alone, on one day, over 300 people from the LGBTQ community showed up at a Houston gun range for free concealed handgun licenses. If we can get the LGBTQ to connect with the gun-toting conservatives, I think society would actually be freer. So let's go on to the next story, which is Texit and Brexit. Following the Brexit referendum, wherein the UK voted to leave the EU, some talking heads have been harping on Google searches for what happens when we leave the EU. Meanwhile, the pound has bounced up higher than it was before the referendum, and Texas even has its own movement called Texit, which I'm assuming just involves large amounts of crappy beer and firearms. Nathan, you were voted most likely to secede in high school. Is this the beginning of a new revolution?
Possibly, and it's very important to look at it because Georgia's considered it way in the past and actually did it at one point. But both Texas, Georgia, and California both all have ports. They have international airports. They have large enough landmass to basically be self-sustainable countries. I mean, Georgia itself is the largest state east of the Mississippi. It's very, very large, and we actually get a lot of our money on agriculture. So we look at this, I mean, Georgia could be self-sustaining. It's the other states that actually get punished by it. And Texas or Georgia leaving the Union could have very negative ramifications for the United States overall, and that is something to consider because that's the whole point of having the United States, is you have a negotiation essentially. You have the free trade and commerce, and you have the ability to basically better the Union as a whole by essentially hedging, min-maxing essentially your resources because you have the banking done in New York. They don't do any farming there. And so to have these laws passed out of Washington and then being handed down is the same reason why Britain left the EU. And the negative externalities from the federal level, essentially, the union level, costing unreasonably more to Texans or Georgians or other counties more, or other states more, is extremely detrimental in the long term. I mean, a lot of people are leaving California to Texas right now, am I right?
Yeah.
Yes, sadly. Sadly. We're getting the ones who want to vote. Not working out for us too well.
You're inundated with people from the West Coast.
Who come in with all the great ideas that made the West Coast a great place to live. Staton, any questions or comments?
I've got some different thoughts on the concept because my opinion of how it should be is I believe that the United States is too large to sustain itself long term. I don't know if that's really makes sense, but my concern with Texas is that so much of the agriculture that we actually consume, so much of the produce we actually consume, comes from international agriculture, comes from Mexico. So my concern would be the kind of breakdown of those trade agreements and how that would affect farmers here who, I don't know, I don't have enough information to really kind of...
What if the states were to go into something sort of more like the Confederation, almost an EU?
Mm.
You know, kind of like a collectivized defense, but the states get to do their own thing. That is kind of what we started off with.
That's true. And I believe it was James Madison who said that more united. Say what?
Sorry, was it cutting out for you, Nathan?
Yes.
Okay, so we didn't hear that last bit. Could you say it over again?
Okay, so I would agree.
Madison.
Say what?
At James Madison?
You had James Madison? Okay. You had me at James Madison. No, in the Federalist Papers is where I think we first kind of got the idea of the United States being not necessarily a confederation of states, but a one large nation, which is where he said that it was odd logic to me that we have to be larger, we must be ever expanding in order to be stable. When I think when you have smaller centers of power scattered across the United States, like you would have in a confederation, that makes more sense to me for long-term stability.
Okay. Nathan, do you have anything to add before I finish this off on this one?
Echo what she said, is having the ability to have a little bit more local voice has been very, very apparent that a lot more people want that, and just on a local level. And you see the frustration and the anger at just these unfunded mandates that get handed down. And one thing people don't realize is a lot of times it's handed down to the states, and the states can't even figure out how to handle it in their own budget, and that is handed down to the county level. And so county commissioners have to figure out how to raise taxes at a local level so that your county taxes go up. And so it's just a pyramid of, all right, well, we can't pay it on the federal level, so let the states figure it out. Well, the states kind of didn't agree to that in the first place, and then that gets handed down by the states because they couldn't get the taxes passed. So it hands out at the county level, and basically the people at the county level is like, wait, we did not sign up for this at all.
Right.
Why is our taxes going up?
Right. Well, I feel like as long as the UK knows how to love, I know they will survive. The way that the EU is trying to scare the UK into staying reminds me of how abusive boyfriends try to keep their girlfriends, Kind of like I don't know, should I do that? It's not been funny so far. I'm the only one trying to be funny. Should I go ahead and do that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of irony with the UK leaving. I mean, it kind of wasn't their idea, but they kind of wanted to be in charge of everything, so they got in, all right, fine. So we can't be the masters of everything, so we'll group hug this idea and then wind up realizing how devastatingly a bad idea it was.
You mean leaving the UK or leaving the EU?
Oh, well, no, when joining the EU. Because the EU damaged them more than anything long term. Yeah, the trade agreements help, but only because a lot more countries join onto the trade agreements. But it doesn't mean they couldn't have gotten better deals out of it in the first place. And you see that here in the United States with NAFTA, the free trade area of the Americas. And so it allowed free trade, but then domestically it wound up hurting us with certain things. And you see that echoing back. It's like, why do we have these trade agreements? And then you have the Pacific Trade Agreement, and that's why people are really, really upset. Is not only that, is you have kind of this weird externality of saying, all right, so you're going to do what we need you to do, but it only benefits the federal level, basically because we get more taxes or some more benefits out of it. But the people themselves, the jobs leaving the country, is a long-term detrimental benefit that hurts us as a nation overall, but only benefits them on basically the higher level, who are basically privy to the information.
Yeah, well, jumping back, it really seems kind of like within the UK, the EU has been going on this whole big trip about how they don't know what will happen once they leave. Sort of the we give you stability. Sure, we slap you around with silly things like saying water does not rehydrate, but you need your boyfriend to protect you. It's a very possessive sort of arrangement. So let's go ahead and go on to story 3. And let me first ask, because the person who asked for this story is not here at this moment. So do you guys have an interest in this?
So, I mean, so someone found the Hitchhiker's Guide to...
I wish. No, it's not quite as cool.
Being able to successfully navigate around... I mean, these type of things have been around for a while.
Right.
Matter of fact, you saw that in the Sherlock episode, which basically how to get around Europe or Britain. With here's all the tour guide spots and everything. So basically, all the information you absolutely need in order to get around Britain is in this little booklet. Basically, it's a tour guide book, and it was handed out to everyone. So,
right. Well, no, this is actually something a little bit more specific. It actually is in Arabic, and it includes information about all of the resources for migrants and for how to move around in the EU legally. I mean, I think it's all legal, but it also has safety at sea for people who are treading illegally. Essentially, their argument is we welcome all travelers on their difficult trip and wish you all a good journey because freedom of movement is everybody's right. It goes on to continue with things about at the outer borders of Europe, people are refused entry, they are imprisoned and deported. Nevertheless, people are coming. And then their group is WTEU.info. Is supporting you who come to Europe in your struggle for a better life. And so essentially it's almost kind of like, do you remember back in World War II how they used to have those secret maps they would smuggle into the prisons, the POW camps? So essentially it's just everything you need to know to get around the EU. So technically they're not breaking the law, they're not arguing for anything illegal, but it is essentially, hey, we know you're coming in here and you're kind of sidestepping the system. Here's how, once you're in the country, jump into the system.
Well, it's a catch-22 with how that system works. I mean, you see that in California with them trying to allow illegals to vote or be able to register to vote or get on Obamacare. But we actually had this during the Civil War with the songs and things that you actually teach slaves exiting the South, basically what to look for. And so they'd speak in code, essentially, in the fields in order to teach people songs in order to have successfully navigate to get the hell out of Dodge, essentially. So they want to be able to, kind of help each other with trying to get things done. And
right.
So it's not unusual to see anything like this. So the ability for them to game the system is, and it's the same thing with anything with government. And this is what I have a kind of a problem with anyone who complains about corporatism and whatnot. The problem is with being able to game the system isn't the problem that people can game the system. It's the ability that we're able to allow it to be gamed.
Okay.
I mean, someone has the power to be bought, has power to basically give favors. Same thing with the welfare and whatnot. We have that system. The wording, legal language is there that can be manipulated and used in a very nefarious way. But should these people be turned away? Absolutely not. But the system should be set up in a way where they shouldn't be hiding and sneaking around or sound like it's very nefarious and being in Arabic and whatnot. I mean, and that's very helpful for them and help them to survive and almost assimilate.
Right. Staton?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure where if there's a legal question of, this book is guiding people to break the law, then I'm not really sure. Unless that's the case, I'm not really sure where the issue is, because this is just, like he said, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to getting out of a dangerous situation. And I don't know, it sounds like, I would appreciate having this. And when we were in South America, I would appreciate having something like this to get out. So yeah, I think it's cool.
The honest tour guide of how to survive South America?
For sure.
Don't go? No, wait, I'm sorry, that's me.
The specific bribing rates for whatever official you're dealing with?
What not to ask when you're being detained, or basically it's like, all right, they want American dollars. That's what they want, because it'll cost you a lot less than the 5,000 pesos. Maybe got past them.
Sorry, you're skipping over.
Yeah, we missed most of what you just said.
Yeah, at the end.
Oh, so it's like, what's the translation? It's like, is it 5,000 pesos or is it, $10? It'd be really nice to know it was only $10.
Good.
Okay, so at least in Bolivia, it's 7.5 Bolivianos to a single dollar. So I don't know, do the math from there. It really varies.
Okie doke. So,
sorry, I brought up bribery.
What? No.
Sorry, I brought up bribery.
No, it's fine. To be honest, I was actually... Say again?
We're not used to it as so blatantly in America, because unless you're a corporation, that's the only time you're really bribing someone, right?
This is true. And it's so odd because on the book in South America, but it's just, and I'm watching movies about other third world countries and kind of finding that this is just how it's done. And not to go off on a tangent on this, but I kind of love...
That's the first thing you say when you're going to go on a tangent. Go ahead.
Fine, 30 seconds or less. I love the simplicity of bribery. It's beautiful. You can get so much stuff done, because when people are in your way because of a moral issue, you can't get past them. But if they're in your way because they want your money, then you can get stuff done.
Okay.
You can get good things done.
Good? Well, I don't know about that.
No,
good things done. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump on.
I cannot speak to your motive, sir.
Say again?
I cannot speak to your motive, sir.
Not getting killed. Okay, so let's jump over to the last. And this one was just a pleasure to read. It was just a joy. It just made me feel warm on the inside and the outside. So students turned in their professor for teaching opposing viewpoints. In Colorado, students reported their professors to an accountability group called Bias Response Team for making them listen to opposing views. The professor was advised not to revisit transgender issues in his classroom, if possible, to avoid the students' expressed concerns. The teacher was also told to avoid stating opinions, his or those of the authors, on the topic as he had previously done when working from the Atlantic article, which I believe was called The Coddling of America, which basically argued that people who were not exposed to opposing ideas become stupider. Staton, you're still in college, so are you totally offended by this guy?
I think he's completely missing the point of college and education, period. The point of education, whatever level you're at, is to be exposed to new ideas and to learn how to cope with things you disagree with and be able to cooperate with people you disagree with. So he's not...
Sorry, you cut out again.
Where did I cut? Where did you lose me?
Just right then, right when I told you cut out.
So not only, sorry, there's a car. Not only do I believe that he is misguided and incorrect, he's also wasting a ton of money because clearly he's not getting what he needs out of his education.
Okay. Nathan, questions or comments?
Well, how much of a hipster class is this? I mean, how meta is the conversation where he's talking about, basically the protectionism that millennials want, and then they're actually asking for the protectionism in the classroom for whatever reason. I mean, having the Socratic process is what I believe college is all about. I mean, you should have the open discussion. You should have, and this is just another article, like time and time again, where millennials are kind of oblivious to the reality that they're kind of been sheltered and protected. And it's really weird being, we have two groups of millennials. We have the older millennial generation, the younger millennial generation. The older millennial generation is in my cohort, and I went to my 10-year high school reunion, and everyone was very grateful to have a job. Everyone's really happy to be working very hard and to be starting a family and have already graduated and kind of moving on to that. And then you have the flip side, where saying, no, we absolutely need all this free stuff. No, I should not have to be working for this. No, I should be able to dress any way I want in my internship, and professionalism needs to just go out the window because I signed a petition. And this goes right back to being, this is how we are learned at a young age, to how we're integrated in high school, and then even in how we are dealt with in college. And essentially, these kids are not being treated like adults, and we're not responding like basically responsible adults to tell them no.
Okay. Yeah. Staton. Did I already ask you? I asked you. That's because I'm silly. Did you guys read actually the quotes that were in the article? They are really doozies. So the first one, this is to the first teacher about the transgender issue. The student who wrote, and by the way, all the names were redacted, so we don't actually know specifically who did and said what. It said, I would just like the professor to be educated about what trans is and how what he said is not okay, because someone who truly identifies as a trans woman, I was very offended and hurt by this. And then the other one, it actually talked about other students are required to watch the in-class debate and hear both arguments presented. Villains. Thoughts?
That is an interesting take on reality.
It gets better. There's a second one. I do not believe that students should be required to listen to their own rights and personhood debated.
I like how the quotes are even in the article itself.
Right.
It has no punctuation at all. Like will be how it's spoken. So if this was verbatim text from a student, I'd be atrocious and slap their lit teacher and the student.
Well, he probably said that's an opposing view. I can't really listen to that. Grammar is just not allowed.
Yeah, it will be oppressing his actual words, and by putting a comma there, or an Oxford comma, that you may be changing what he's actually saying, or meaning, or applying.
Right.
Well, from a journalistic standpoint, then I would not change the grammar, the punctuation. I wouldn't add anything in there because you do change his meaning. So.
Now it's not all bad because there actually is fire is involved. There is I'm gonna butcher his name, but Ari Cohn is a lawyer with the FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, who said it was deeply troubling. They've actually gone out to communicate with them, and I do like the other complaints after they what was the name of that group? Oh, I didn't write it down. Anyway, but they actually
bias response team.
No, yeah, that. But they actually had other. Someone did a Freedom of Information Act to get all of the reported things, so they could see what was actually being said. Some other things that were complained about were a trigger from an awareness ad about healthy and unhealthy foods, a health center worker asking a student if she or they needed birth control, and a campus poster used the word crazy in it. Those were all things that were reported to the bias response teams. And by the way, there are over 100 bias response teams set up across campuses across the United States of America. Benjamin Franklin would be so proud right now.
Join or die.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful on which clubs you're joining, though.
It was funny when you first sent the article, because there's two articles in the section. When I opened the first one and read it a little bit, I'm like, oh, this is just a satire piece. And then I saw the accompanying article. I was like, oh, they're reading.
No,
that's not a joke.
You know what's I thought was really messed up or odd about this is by placing feelings over free speech, these people are actually rendering themselves intellectual neuters. By dumbing themselves down, they're actually going to become less and less relevant in society, and people are actually going to stop listening to them. In fact, it's because of things like this, I think that the alt-right and rabble-rousers like Donald Trump have such a voice. Because, you know, when you start acting like an idiot and talking like one, people who are willing to call you an idiot are going to get airtime.
But Thomas, you're wrong there. I'm going to make you care.
You're going to make me care how?
I'm going to make you care I'm going to have this petition signed, and we're going to have this organization hound you and your family, and it's going to post it over the internet, and we're going to have mean comments. Mean comments.
Mean comments. I'm just going to point out that as a Christian libertarian, I get lots of mean comments. I'm just immune to all of it. I can just wade through it.
As a female Christian libertarian, I get even more.
Oh, and no, I won't say that. But okay, so right now I'm going to go ahead and do the ending part, and then we'll jump into the open discussion. Okay, so everyone who's been listening, if you have A, enjoyed, B, hated, C, don't understand this video, please comment, or better yet, make a video response. Are you hoping to see an article discussed here? Go ahead and send your articles to the Horde at waitingforbarbarians.com. Puppy and kitten videos / photos are also really appreciated. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up for open discussion so we can go back over if you had any topics that you wanted to discuss or things that were interesting.
On the last article, it was interesting because it's kind of a weird East Coast, West Coast thing. In Georgia, we actually had the Can Kicked Back tour on a liberal arts campus. We had 450 kids show up, and they are willing to strike almost the entire budget of the United States government in order to make sure that we actually paid off our debt, and so the future generations will be taken care of. They're willing to bite the bullet, and actually they're like, yeah, I don't expect to get elected. And the exact opposite seems to be apparent on the West Coast, where you have this wanting to be protected. You don't want to hear any discerning viewpoints. We want to, have the government take care of everything. And so that's why I really would like to see Texas secede and kind of give us a barrier in between the West Coast, and you guys can keep the Californians.
What do you think?
No. It's not open border until they all get here and then close the border. That's not how that works. As far as I'm concerned, that isn't open. They can go back or forward. Plus, I don't want Texit to do Texit just yet, because I'm going to point out our governor. Say again?
All the microbrewers that you guys got there, that's what's distracting them. They want the hipster type community, and don't let them know that Georgia has them, because I don't want them showing up here.
Dude, I'm going to point out you just told them that. In fact, you know what? We'll be looking up the best breweries in Georgia, especially any breweries that are low in calories, or vegan, or gluten-free.
Or offer kale ale.
Actually, which is nice.
I really hope that exists somewhere, though. It'd be
I think
disgusting.
it does, because when you said it, I had flashbacks. I've seen that somewhere.
Flashbacks to something. It's interesting that the West Coast would be the side that's thinking, give me more, protect me, because if you look at the West Coast history, that's really where we have our, the frontier. That's where we have that pioneering attitude of I'm going to go out and I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to take care of my family, and I'm going to support my community, and I'm going to be my own man, kind of cultural heritage that you have out there. It's really fascinating to see it flipped on its head.
Well, it's interesting to say flipped on its head, because people debated whether or not the globe has been projected correctly as being correctly oriented north and south. And as we see, the West Coast is the left, and the East Coast is clearly the right.
Well, wouldn't you say that, and I'm curious about this, how is the LGBTQ and other groups like that in Georgia? Because I know Georgia used to have a real big issue with, I don't want to say hate, but you've had plenty of issues with bigotry and bias in both ways, in all kinds of different ways. I'm wondering if that's made the people there a little bit more robust in attitude.
It also has to deal with how many, like a lot of people who live in Atlanta aren't from Georgia. And you have the two different distinctions. You have Georgia and then you have Atlanta. And a lot of the LGBTQ community lives within Atlanta, the perimeter proper. And we actually have a very large pride parade that we have every year, and the LP Georgia has actually been involved with it quite a few years. So they are doing very well. They thrive in downtown Atlanta. You do see a lot less of them outside the perimeter area.
Okay.
At least openly, so.
No. You weren't like Harva. Did you hear about that, actually?
I may have. I'm just not getting the reference.
2015, up in, Sweden, I think. We actually covered it in the first podcast. They did a big parade through a Muslim neighborhood, basically saying we're here and you guys can't, you guys can't hate us because we're gay. They were sadly co-opted by alt-right type peoples up there.
Well, did you hear about the KKK rally that they had at Stone Mountain, where the Klan members were inside a barricade and then were attacked, and the police had to escort them out? It was the complete opposite of what people would normally expect would normally happen.
Is it?
Sorry, I'm trying. Is it bad that I don't actually feel bad about that? I mean,
it's funny because people have the same opinion. They're like, well, you kind of deserve it just for your ideals, but also you were just gathering within a barricade and Molotov cocktails being thrown at you while you're within a barricade. It was kind of like laying siege to the city at that point, and I don't think that was necessarily a fair thing to say, hey, we want freedom of speech here, we'll get a permit and we'll have a rally, and then you're going to quarantine us into a small little pit.
No. I mean,
that sounds very Nazi.
I don't think it's good that people are throwing Molotov cocktails, and absolutely the police need to go and defend all people. But I don't actually feel bad for the KKK about that, if that makes sense.
No, it's completely understandable, and we had a lot of mixed opinions here about it. And you have to be I adhere to the non-aggression principle. And yes, I do not agree with their ideals. Yes, I do believe that they incite very radical behavior. But they at the time were not doing anything wrong, and it sucks for them.
Were they wearing white after Labor Day though?
No. I mean, it's a typical Georgian garb, denim jeans and
They
No, I
were
plaid.
appreciate.
in the room.
That's not the KKK. If they're not wearing the night sheets, that doesn't count. That just makes them rednecks.
That's so fascinating. Now it's how big of a trucker hat and the trucker nut balls that you have on your truck, or if you
Wait,
have.
is that's what the KKK is now?
That's what it seems like now.
Trailer hitches and cowboy hats.
Well, and Confederate flags on almost everything.
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
think the
it's a
Confederate
pretty
flag is
flag.
actually
I mean,
kinda
come
cool.
on.
I think the Confederate flag is kind of cool, apart from, whatever, that.
It's like a lot of things that get hijacked and get used for something nefarious, and it's frustrating to see. I mean, we had as a Georgian, as you grew up in learning Georgia history, the what you're taught and what the honest truth is the South seceded and the North came down. It's called the War of Northern Oppression down here.
I thought it was aggression.
Well,
That's what he said.
I heard it. No, I guess they keep going.
Oppression or aggression, both will work just fine. And basically, we're told you can't govern yourselves, and you're going to be part of us because we need you.
Yeah. What fun that was.
I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. People argue that they were. I mean, yeah. I lost my train of thought halfway through, but it doesn't make sense to me that the problem is that they seceded because whatever reason. The point is that they seceded, and so the issue is for me is thinking, why does it matter why that they? And anyway, never mind. Ignore me.
Well,
I lost my train of thought halfway through.
If you're thinking about the actual process and how would you restitute the slaves? You would maybe partial off some land for them, give them back, their rights. No, what they did, they burned everything from North Georgia to the coast. That didn't leave anything for anyone. It was just teaching us a lesson, and that's what it boiled down to.
I recall, was it Milton Friedman or maybe it was just Thomas Sowell? It was probably all of them. Said that restitution can't be on a. No, it was after the fact. My bad. I was thinking about when he said that you can't have reparations made to a race. You can only have individual reparations when it comes past a certain generation point. Otherwise, there's no way of knowing who you're actually giving back to. But I think it's a real big problem. I'd have to look up the actual facts because I read it in a history book. I can't actually give you the specifics. But what was the big general from the north?
Sherman?
I think so, yeah. So Sherman actually gave, I think, about 1,000 acres to all the slaves that were following them. And right after the war, the southern slave owners used their money to buy that back from the government. And then all the the freed slaves were kicked off. So even the restitution didn't last if you had the ability to buy it out of them.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. So if you think about it, was it government-owned land or was it privately owned land? And so did the person freely give up their livelihood, essentially, in order for the money? And that's the big debate about, is a business evil? If I am selling a good and I'm charging too much for it, am I charging too much? Were they buying it from the government in order to get it back? Basically, we're using eminent domain or a back door in order to obtain it back, or did they legally just purchase it back from the former slaves, or did they bully them into lowering the price?
The union gave it back to the slave owners and the previous owners. So essentially what it was the slaves were given the land as basically restitution, basically a way of starting off your life again. And then once the slave owners re-swore their loyalty, or I guess that was the first time, they swore loyalty to the union, they were brought back into the union, and then they were given the land back. And then all the freed slaves were evicted.
Yeah, and then ask yourself, who is at fault for that? Is it the people who originally owned the land, or is it the federal government going back on their word, which they've done so many times? Like the Indians, it's like, we're going to put you out here in this nice area out here. Oh, wait, you actually got minerals and stuff we actually need? How about we put you in a wasteland and we're going to dump toxic waste and radioactive material on it? and not provide any access to the outside world.
Okay, I'm gonna make an executive decision. We shouldn't be talking about race. That might be a mistake. We're very likely to say something that could get us in trouble. There was one thing. Is there anything that you actually want to say before I switch topics? Nathan?
Nope.
Okay. Did you guys see that the shooter, no one actually died in South Carolina? Did you guys notice that?
I did.
Yeah, I did notice that, and it's interesting that what would be the police response?
That accidentally shoot up 3 of the... No, I'm sorry, that's not fair. I don't want to say that. It's not fair to judge them all by what happened in the 90s.
You miss those riots, don't you?
No, I'm not thinking of the riots. I'm thinking of that time that they had 4 police officers. Say again?
I started singing again.
Oh, okay, so you're bored. I'll jump back over to you. I'm just remembering that case where 4 police officers shot all 3 magazines each. So it's about 95 bullets, and only 14 bullets actually hit the guy.
Yeah,
New York.
Only 14. Wow.
The interesting thing about that was the case in New York where they emptied out basically all the bullets that they had, and the guy was even shot through the bottom of the foot after he was basically down and dead. You know,
that reminds me of that movie with Tom Cruise where he got shot through the heel and it goes all the way through the foot. Man, that was nasty. That just
makes sense to Tom Cruise, and that's just nasty.
No. Tom Cruise was cool once before he started jumping on couches. Did she drop out? No, okay.
No, I'm right here.
That's a weird glitch.
Yeah.
I just said that Tom Cruise is short, and that's the biggest issue with him.
No, it was still kind of messed up watching a bullet go through the foot. That was messed up.
True.
Also, tired hit him in the kneecap.
That's true. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. Those both sound like they hurt, like more than most gun wounds, bullet wounds. We talked about the British pound. I know that when I had written this, it had said that the British pound had actually jumped back up. It has actually gone back down. The UK.
That kind of makes sense. Things are settling down. The dust is starting to settle, and I think people. See, no one has ever left the EU, so no one knows entirely what's going to happen. So it makes sense that while in these next few months to a year, I would think that things would kind of down and eventually settle into what it's going to be.
Yeah, let me share this. No, I'm going to do this. Okay, so then, so if you look at this, I think it was, July. It was July 1st that they were actually talking about how it had gone back up. But it actually dropped back down. That's not right. Yeah, so anyway, so that's what it looks like. If anybody wants to see that later, they can just let me know.
Yeah, it's interesting because Britain, when they joined the EU, they weren't originally tied to the EU basically dollar type. I mean, like not as strongly. And
the euro.
Yeah, so the British pound has always been stronger, just historically than it. And so I think all this is so people letting the pound slip for basically any speculation, and then it basically reached a dollar point, which was like, it's time to buy into this stuff because they know long term that it's strong, and so they're kind of buying it, and especially with the U.S. dollar being so weak. And then the other markets throughout the world just not having long-term certainty. So it's no surprise that it's going to yo-yo back and forth. It's eventually going to stabilize here, I think, and you'll see much more consistently. I'd say February you'll see the real numbers.
Right. Is anybody else trying to invest in the pound?
You mean Bitcoin?
No, actually, I said both.
Way to go.
Else said that. I think you mean Bitcoin. The only
waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, you were just waiting for Bitcoin? Oh, I should look up some...
I was waiting for it to come up. I knew it would.
I'll do a story about the Bitcoin. I'll look one up. It'll be...
I don't understand Bitcoin.
I can explain it, but you don't want me to?
That is accurate. Has there been anything said about Britain returning to the gold standard or silver standard? I forget what they were originally before joining the EU. But has anything come up about that?
I thought Germany started demanding their gold back. Didn't they? Didn't one of the nations actually say, hey, we want you to ship our gold back because you're dropping out of the EU?
I don't know. I haven't heard much about the economic side of it.
Gold, value of gold. Gold, Brexit.
Let me Google that for you.
Let me Google that. That's what
Let me Google that.
Yeah, it's actually a 2-year high on gold prices.
Wow.
By Brexit spooked investors. People are actually investing more into the German and the Swedish.
Interesting. Wasn't Switzerland in early talks about leaving the EU as a result? Like, weren't they one of the...
Which one?
Switzerland.
Maybe.
I heard something about that, like in the week after Brexit. There were some other countries talking about leaving the EU as well, and Switzerland just one of them.
Yeah, I don't... The problem with Brexit is it's its own topic. Like, it's its own show. So I didn't necessarily look up everything. Plus, I avoided it like the plague because this kind of stuff does not interest me. Except when
it interests me. I mean, we basically all woke up in a brand new world after Brexit with the, frankly, worldwide economic ramifications that we're going to be seeing. It's kind of important.
Well, yeah, it is important, but it's also very boring.
What I liked about it is started the discussion that we had with Texit and Georgia Exit and other countries looking at it, and you saw Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. That discussion of those dollars collapsing, Russians' involvement with the Middle East war, the Chinese dropping their dollar currency to hurt the U.S. market. So everyone's been playing a weird hedging bets game. So everyone's sitting there going, we don't want to be, we want to be global because we want to be able to trade with people, but we don't want our markets or our own livelihoods to crash because someone wants to have a fit and be childish and want to, it's like, no, we're not going to good trade deals with Britain because you left us. That doesn't make any sense for either one of the parties involved.
Yeah.
It's like a really bad breakup. I mean, it really is. It's like, no, I want the dog too. We're gonna split the dog, and I mean literally, not we get one, shared custody of it, because it doesn't make any sense. It's not good for anyone to have it that way.
I don't think you get to call out a sausage if it's made out of dog. I'd have to check the EU bylaws.
Well, if water doesn't hydrate, then a hot dog clearly isn't a dog.
That was a great... I love that article. Did you get to see that?
Yeah, it's an older article, and I thought it was hilarious. I'm actually going to be talking about it as a show topic next weekend with the other show I'm on, the Hayden Collins radio program, and looking at just ridiculous things like that the government just passes down. It's like, yeah, this is totally legit because Gatorade hydrates better than water. So
plants crave.
It doesn't though.
Well, it has to hydrate in order to hydrate better, right? Unless it doesn't hydrate at all. So your comparison is zero hydration, so I hydrate better, so I have a level 1 hydration essentially. Yeah.
Plus 5 to hydration.
I just wanted to make the idiocracy reference, okay? What is the name of the URL? Or you know what? Just give me the name of your the other podcast, and we'll put the URL in it.
Well, it's the Hayden Collins radio program. You can find it. And we're mainly broadcast on the Roku NetWork.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
There'll be a URL, right? Or you can share me a URL and I can put it in when we actually put the video up.
Yeah, I'll give you the YouTube link to the main show.
Okay. Very cool. Any other topics that you'd all like to discuss or bring up?
Well, having our fourth be out did shorten the overall conversation a little bit with the opinions back and forth.
Yeah, and plus she was a pistol. She was the one that was going to really hopefully take advantage of the third, because she comes at it with a little bit more of a neo-libertarian conservative. So border rights are a little bit more up her field.
Yeah, that discussion's been interesting by itself on the national level. You know, we absolutely need to build the wall, but then you need eminent domain. Then you need to, you know, it's like, all right, so where are we going to go with this now?
Didn't I hear that they actually built the wall like 2 miles inside of the U.S., so they actually blocked off people on the wrong side?
Yeah, there's actually a golf course that's actually on the outside of the wall. Like, people living on the outside of the wall, they're technically in the United States. And so you have to have enough access for them to come through it. So it's like, wait a minute. So you have a large hole in the wall, essentially, with your own citizens on the outside, and that's the most welcoming thing you can come up with, instead of, I don't know, pressuring the Mexican government, trying to get the papers to us in time so we can process the people legally instead of people being desperate. But you know, people don't know the bribe level. I guess the United States isn't paying the bribes for the people coming over. I think that's the issue. I'd probably be cheaper overall than what people think they're taking from Medicaid, Medicare, and all this other stuff they think the people are taking for us while simultaneously taking our jobs.
Took our jobs. Now, there was... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to bring up one of my favorite anecdotes I learned from my history class, my U.S. Culture and History class this past semester, was that in reading some old, like, some old slavers, like apologetics for slavery writings, a lot of people said, "We'll give them free, they'll take our jobs." And I just thought it was so funny that rhetoric hasn't really changed much at all.
Now there is actually... Sorry. Go ahead.
That's all. I was just going to say that the context has changed, but the rhetoric itself doesn't seem to.
There is actually a really good argument. It was actually made in San Antonio, Texas, by a vice president of the local Bank of America branch, so don't hold that against him. But it actually talked about that in 2014, half of the total employees of the Border Patrol are actually up for retirement. So with 50% of them up for retirement, the increases necessary to make the Border Patrol across, you know, have that wall and have it patrolled, actually you would have to fill back up 50% before we could even get to that point.
I don't know. I think there's a whole bunch of people available that were kind of wasting their talents in Afghanistan and Iraq and just occupying land in other people's countries.
For some reason.
Say again? Sorry. No, it sounded like you said something. That is actually a point, though. The wall actually only adds 15 minutes to the crossover to get into the United States.
Well, it depends how fast you get it through the catapult.
Did anyone else think of that scene in World War Z with the zombies trying to get over the wall into Israel?
Are you comparing Hispanic immigrants to zombies piling up against the wall?
No.
You sure? Because that's what it sounded like.
Well, you can take it how you will. I can't speak to your reality or your truth.
Okay. Now, there is actually a good point that population...
By the way.
Right, no, I got you. The population growth is actually going to start petering out. We're not making enough people to replace the people that are retiring. So Go ahead.
This was actually a question in a campaign that I was helping out on. This question actually came up from a lady because we were explaining it. So if you look at, and you can look at the camera, so if you look at the current population of the baby boomers, and you look at the Generation Xers and then the millennials, you do not have a replacement population just of the tax base in order to basically pay for the baby boomers retiring, much less Generation X as well. And they were like, well, we need to have Americans take these jobs. We need, we bring in talent all over the world all the time. Most of our PhD students in the United States are not domestic to the United States. They're from other countries taking PhD courses here. And the lady got so upset. She goes, "Well, how do we, make basically have more Americans, having these jobs?" And it's like, unless you mandate people having kids, there's no way. I mean, there's no logistic way to solve that problem. So you have to have people come in within the country. And so
I have the solution.
well, I like to hear that.
Be very, very careful because we are still recording.
Government subsidies for all Mormons.
They already have. All right, yeah. So now there is an issue about countries being able to reabsorb or to incorporate the migrants. Like I'm pretty sure that most of the countries have already said they can't take any more refugees without compromising their social system.
I mean, what social system are they risk having? I mean, we've complained for almost a decade now about, well, how dare we have Press 2 for Spanish? And it's like, well, if you want to actually have people to get stuff done legally, you need to at least offer the language that they primarily speak. Because I know my roommate, his second language is English. He's from Korea. He learned English by watching television. He's been in the country for a very long time, and I mean, besides having a little bit of a dialect, you can't really tell that he's, wasn't born in the United States. And that's true for a lot of people. And having your mother teach you growing up, they're going to teach you in the primary language that they know. The same thing with your grandmother. So, I mean, my aunt or my grandmother was German. So all my aunts and uncles and my mother know a lot of little German words because that's how to communicate best with the kids, even though she did know English. Basically, she didn't know the English word, she just used the German word, and the kids had to learn it because she was either unwilling or unable to learn the English word that was appropriate for it.
Well, I don't think that's not a government issue, though. I mean, I think that's a cultural. The government isn't mandating that you have Press 2 for Spanish, are they?
No, that's the functionality. So if people are worried about losing their societal structure because of people coming in and bringing their own culture, that doesn't make any sense because you are forcing the government to oppress that structure overall. And if the society that basically makes that community is not from the United States, so say the entire population of the county that I live in is all migrant people from various parts of the country, or various parts of the world. So say it was even split between 3 different cultures. You have Chinese, you have South America, and you have the Middle East. Which one is the culture? You have to force all of them to speak English and dress in quote unquote American clothes and speak with a regional dialect. Is that normal? I mean, as pocket assimilation, yes, it's very important, but these people develop in community, and that's normal for humans. We develop in communities that are very similar to one another. That's why you have very similar income levels and very similar houses, very similar job sets. That's why things kind of accumulate the way they do.
It's interesting that you bring up that kind of split communities that develop, because this actually ties back into what I said earlier about the smaller centers of power and the separated states that are together when we were talking about the Confederation and things like that earlier. Because I've used Switzerland as an example. This is a small country with 4 primary cultural groups. They've got the French, I want to say German, and a couple of other neighboring nations that have a very strong cultural influence, and they have 4 official languages, so all government and official papers are done in 4 separate languages, and these cultures exist together side by side. And I'm not sure structure could be sustainable in a large country with a small localized center of power. but in a smaller center of power, I think that could work. There's a smaller region, I mean.
Well, I mean, look at something like, so you have things like Japan, Israel, and Poland. They're nation states. They're all one people living within the boundaries. That's normal. So everyone has kind of the same ideals. But even you look at Israel's own functional government, they have fractional representation in their own parliament. So they have of one background. And so even they can't get together and get along and do things like efficiently in their own government. But you look at the United States. The United States is very large landmass. Compared to China, China and the United States are very similar in size, but China has twice the population on living on less than half the landmass. And you still have 7 different types of people living in those regions, and it is very regional to the north and the south, very much like the United States. But they don't have a lot of people coming into their country, whereas the United States does. And they assimilate and move out of the country, and very pocketed. You had most Norwegian-type people move to Michigan and northern Indiana area. And so you had pocketed cultural development because that's where the communities were most the easiest access to get to, but is also kind of familiar with their own background. And so they developed those own colloquial communities based on the homeland, essentially. And a lot of them were white in color, that because they're coming from Europe, and that's where most of our trade was coming from. But you also have the same thing happening in New Mexico and Texas. You have those communities being developed on the border cities, even further north than that. Same thing on the west, where you have a lot of Asian cultures dispersed along the coast, because that was the trade and the people coming in developing those cultures. Those cultures come from somewhere else. There's nothing American about any of it. We came together as a nation with a common goal, saying we want to be left alone and we want to be prosperous, and hoorah, we're the best.
It's actually oorah, but okay.
No, even the Army and the Marines and the Navy all acknowledge that there are different pronunciations of hoorah, oorah, and whatever else you want to say.
Each one has a different one.
But that was actually, you kind of just illustrated, I think, with my original point, which I guess I didn't communicate properly, was because what we have is we have these vastly different communities trying to work together on the federal level, on a higher level than anyone can really work in, and it doesn't work. No one, because we've got one half of the country who dramatically disagrees with the other half, just kind of using simple terms here, because nothing's quite split that way. But what I was saying was that lost my train of thought again. I had a long day. What I was saying is that smaller states which have, so say Michigan with those Norwegian peoples, if Michigan had greater control over itself, then I think there would be less conflict overall with the cultures trying to work together, the different cultural groups trying to work together.
Okay. And that goes back to the nationalism that we're experiencing now with a lot of the younger millennials. Like, you can be made to care. Saying that, this comes from a comedian, so I am borrowing here. It's like, yeah, my friend, hates gays. Well, he's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to do that. Well, he does. You can't force him not to do that.
Right.
What are you actually going to physically do? What, he should be locked up because he doesn't like them? That is kind of a ridiculous notion. Yes, you're absolutely allowed to be offended. Yes, you're absolutely allowed to have opposing viewpoints. Yes, you should absolutely be taught opposing viewpoints. You don't have to accept or agree with them. That is what life is like, and that is what the entire world is like, unfortunately. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that live down south that would like the entire world and believe that the entire world is owned by America, and we are the only thing that in this world that is absolutely free, and we represent everything just and right and fair in the world.
And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and I'll let that all work out. Does anyone have any final words? 15 seconds or less?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you very much, Staton. I'm going to kill off the broadcast. Ciao.